I am in the presence of superhumans. What did I get myself into? Those two lines crossed my mind and my mouth several times since January. My name is Toyese Oyeyemi, and I am a real-life, self-proclaimed serial self-doubter. But that's only my day job. In my free time, I practice public health. More specifically, I am what we call a Health Extension Regional Officer. Fancy title, right? Or a HERO for short. Catchy, right? And never in the history of irony has a more conflicting title been placed on someone. You see, I spent my entire life with a crippling fear of mediocrity. Ask anyone who was raised by Nigerian parents, and you'll quickly find that it's really endemic, and surely to others too. So the original title of this talk was 3 Life Hacks for Serial Self-Doubt. Through personal and professional experiences, I was going to offer 3 tips or life hacks on how to grapple with what I considered the most paralyzing component of imposter syndrome. But that's not what this is titled. And that's not what I'm going to do, because the reality of it is I really haven't hacked anything. And I realized this at about 9 o'clock last night. When I started thinking about how I was going to deliver the original version of this talk. Because around 9 o'clock last night, I was smacked by the very issue I was about to provide tips on tackling. I started thinking that, if I'm even a minute late for anything else this week, I'm at risk for being characterized. If I speak too quickly or, maybe disagree with somebody else, I could get minimalized. If I just deliver a casual pep talk, the possibility of being scrutinized. And if I call it all the ways that in one way or another, all these things have already happened at some point in time or another, I could be criticized. So rather, I'm going to spend the rest of my 13 minutes or however much time I have left talking about how my perception of you, all as a collective group, has clashed with my own perception of self, and ironically decimated the confidence of my perception. And I mean that in a constructive way, not a critical way. And you'll see why in a moment. So I was really torn between sharing details on my culminating experience or details on what's impacted me most over the last year. And initially, I had planned on merging my challenges and triumphs of the project with the common theme of self-doubt that really kind of permeates through every single decision that I make. And I was hoping it would appear as this nice blended portrayal of taking an ongoing struggle and kind of applying its experiences over the past year and delivering these 3 tidy ways that I overcame my serial self-doubt in a nice digestible format. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my project, and then I'm going to just detail life hack number 3. So this summer, I led a team of several internal university and community partners where I live in Albuquerque to develop a pre-health professions program for rising high school seniors of color, who are interested in one of several fields, clinical or non-clinical, that address racial health inequities. We selected 8 students for an intensive leadership and health equity training program. Sounds familiar, right? And in fact, the format was actually strikingly similar to ours. We brought in the top faculty from across the campus to deliver lectures. They had a series of great site visits in the community and within the hospital. They conducted research seminars. They did a pediatric oncology rotation, a shadowing rotation. I mean, we pulled out the works. We gave them every possible opportunity within that span of time that we could possibly give them. They went to the Office of the Medical Investigator. They attended community coalition meetings. I mean, they even lived on campus during the entire course. And we're talking about 17-year-old students of color, many of whom had never been onto university campus, talk less of the medical campus. So there was a lot of parallels. And even at the end, part of the application process was to propose a health equity project that they would address. So we were astounded by the project. We managed to gather a really strong crop of students in the first year, and we really watched them transform right in front of our eyes. And the program really received statewide accolades. This was actually a really well-regarded program, and I was fortunate that that ended up being the outcome. This fellowship project was, in a lot of ways like my magnum opus. This was, I was convinced it was excellent. The most pivotal point of that project was one of the last moments. Myself and 3 colleagues hosted the students for group and one-on-one debrief sessions, and these young men and women were rock stars. Those 8 impressionable, soon-to-be freshmen took everything we threw at them in those 10-hour days, once or twice 12-hour days, and they evolved right in front of us. And they articulated how, in the final evaluation session, that they felt that they evolved. And they discussed how they came in thinking that health was, as simple as just not being sick, right? Which I think is a pretty common definition of health for a 17 or 18-year-old in a lot of ways. But they quickly learned over time how social factors influence them in their communities. They expressed a novel but a thoughtful understanding of environmental racism and of gentrification and of gerrymandering, and these 8 students being from 8 distinct different neighborhoods, they really explained how these factors played a role in even how the 8 of them live and how they interact with each other as a cohort. Without prompt, they passionately explained how they were not only grateful for the experience, but also so dearly appreciative of being brought together and the bonds that they shared in such a short amount of time. Most impressively, they were able to define themselves and confidently contribute ways in which they believed their group would mature and lead through college and beyond in the workplace. I marveled at their collective and their individual self-awareness. I couldn't believe it. We were building the health equity warriors of the future right before our eyes, and they found their tribe. I was in the presence of superhumans. What did I get myself into? I work on several grants and community health programs, strategic planning every day, but this one felt different. I felt accomplished. I felt proud. I earned my title in that moment. I was a hero, and by all accounts, these scholars were superhumans. Which brings me to my third and only life hack: find your tribe. You see, the issue with being a serial self-doubter among superhumans is that it can impact your confidence in one of a few different ways. It can either lift you to new heights and really elevate your esteem to a place of rare belonging and all that superficial glory that comes along with feeling like you're among the best. It can also lower you into a realization that you are simply a mortal imposter with nothing more than pipe dreams of flirting with the cool kids. Or, if you're really unlucky, it can make you contemplate an even more frightening possibility, that in the midst of great and unique figures, you are simply mediocre. So I recall at the initial convening back in January sharing candid thoughts with some of my newfound counterparts. And it was mentioned that a common thread that was noticed among the group was scars, right? Scars of past discouragements, scars of professional challenges, scars of being beaten down by failures. And I recall the immediate shame and confusion of having a different journey into that Bethesda basement that day. Am I the only one who hasn't been pushed down after years of passionate causes? Am I the only one who is not searching for a newfound revival of energy? Am I the only one not experiencing the burnout that comes along with years of pressing against the system or of not receiving support from their supervisor or their organization or their colleagues? That wasn't my experience. Who am I, and why in the world am I here? These people who I've known for only hours are here because of their talents and their challenges that they've managed to focus on overcoming. Maybe you're only even a hero because of circumstance and a little bit of luck. You see, my professional route to this experience was relatively linear. I was, by my estimation at least, an average high school student athlete with an inflated expectation of playing in the NFL. But the growth spurt never really came. So my mother told me to take my mediocre height and my mediocre GPA to a mediocre state college. So that's what I did. I took college much more seriously than high school. and I spent 3 years as a pre-med biology major. But I couldn't master in 2 semesters what this group seems to have been able to master in 1 week: organic chemistry. Superhumans. But in hindsight, I'm relieved. Because outside of that slight and early detour, I was confident that population health was my calling. I understood policy. I revered primary care. Social determinants of health just made sense to me. And I was skilled at, in my opinion, identifying the needs of my community and learned over time strategies on how to respond. It was almost effortless in a lot of ways. I was a health educator for the Air Force for 2 years after college, in really the most plumb position that an entry-level 20-something-year-old serial self-doubter could possibly ask for. I was good at it. Then I almost immediately went to graduate school and completed that in a respectable amount of time. There was really nothing special about it. There was nothing unique about it. There was nothing particularly challenging about it. Yet here I was having bagels and coffee with the X-Men in Professor X's dining room, right? It had me shook. I listened to stories and accomplishments. I marveled at the proverbial battle wounds that these superhumans were bravely sharing with one another and myself. And I became obsessed with finding answers. I went back home and I talked about tales of these X-Men that I had found. And I scoured through Professor X's book looking for answers. I thought back to my public health training and thought to myself, how much of the superhuman ability can be traced to genetics, and how much of it is some sort of environmental exposure that all the X-Men happen to come across except for me at some point in time. And I was unwilling to give up. I wanted to be part of this newfound tribe. I found them inspiring. I found them exhilarating. I found them intriguing. I think back to the program, the project that we developed over the summer. And I remember after the success of it being just so excited to share that news with my colleagues. And I was gonna share a press release and a link. I was gonna send pictures by email. I was gonna throw praise and through WhatsApp. And I was itching to share with my superhuman fellows that I too was really figuring this whole thing out. And then I thought back to the program and to the project that had really quickly garnered a strong reputation there in New Mexico. And almost on cue, rather than sending a detailed summary of the program, I began to wonder if I could have pulled this off in Tallahassee, if I could have pulled this off in Boston, if I could have pulled this off in the Philippines, if I could have even pulled this off in Portland, Maine. And then I spiraled. And in the most normalized, predictable way that a serial self-doubter spirals, in silence. That loud, clamoring, internal wrestling that just projects itself as outward silence. I spent every 2 weeks listening to struggles and triumphs, and I spiraled. And I realized that as I was kind of listening to the anxieties that these superhumans had, I've always had a fear of mediocrity, but I've never had a fear of failure. And I started to try and explore why, and I realized that it's because failure you can blame on somebody else if you really needed to. Mediocrity seems to fall squarely on you. Failure just felt subjective, and mediocrity felt personal. So instead of ending on what I've learned in the past year, I guess I'll share with you all how I hope to grow in the next one. So knowledge itself is iterative. It's a process, and this exercise to me was a call to action for discovery. And on this journey for me, confidence and ambition are really only flashlights and shovels. Self-doubt seems to be the compass. And really the only way for me to gauge exactly where it is that I want to go. So in my journey this year, what I've learned about the common threads of humanity, or what I've learned are the common threads of humanity. And that, these aren't superhumans. These were superhumans, whose superness was simply a desire to help other humans and the ability and the privilege to do so. So I'm not a superhuman, but I'm also not a caricature. I'm not a punchline. I'm not a scapegoat. I'm not a token. I'm not an abbreviation. I'm not all these things that I had all this doubt about. I'm a human, and we all are, in this room and beyond this room. And it's the connection of our experiences that manifest themselves as as care, as passion, as kindness, as empathy, as love, and the impact of those manifestations that define our humanity. It's our own individuality, though, that makes us a super collective, yet still distinctly human. And I'll end with my favorite quote by Maya Angelou. My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some humor, and some style. Thank you.